The Eurozone agrees on a financial rescue package of €500 billion to help countries cope with the coronavirus crisis. It's a deal that comes on the back of much division among member states. Our correspondent in Brussels, Dave Keating, will be bringing us the details. For the first time since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, France has seen a drop in the number of patients with the virus being admitted to intensive care units. A small ray of hope that it could be reaching the peak of infections, even if that peak is at a very high level. And 6.6 million more Americans sign up for unemployment benefits in the US in the last week alone. It's the biggest and quickest loss of jobs there since records began in the 1940s. Hello and a very warm welcome to you. I'm Eve Irvine. It's good to have you with us. Well, €500 billion. Ministers from the 19 Eurozone countries agreed to a financial rescue package to help countries, notably the hardest hit, Italy and Spain, cope with the coronavirus crisis. It's the most important economic plan in the EU's history, according to the French finance minister. France, one of the region's bigger economies, is already in recession, while Germany has also said its GDP for the second quarter will take a sizable hit. Well, to get the latest, we can cross to our correspondent in Brussels, Dave Keating. Dave, after much debate, Eurozone ministers now announcing a deal. Tell us more about the details of it. Who gets what?
Yeah, last night we heard from Eurogroup chief Mario Centeno saying this essentially is made up of three packages. Two were uncontroversial and a third was quite controversial, which was causing the delay here. This came after 3 days of negotiations, over 16 hours sitting in video chats. And this all came down to the question of how to use architecture that was intended for the financial crisis of a decade ago. Now, the package consists of a €100 billion re-employment scheme called SURE that's designed to keep people in employment. Then there will be up to €200 billion available in loans from the European Investment Bank. And then finally, countries can draw up to €240 billion from the European Stability Mechanism. Now, that's the tool that was designed during the financial crisis, the debt crisis, to give countries liquidity. And it comes with conditionality. And that's what was causing controversy here, because the countries affected, Italy and Spain, which just happened to be the same countries that were affected during the sovereign debt crisis, they were saying, look, there's no reason for this money to be coming with conditionality and oversight. That's just insulting. We didn't do anything wrong. We just happened to be the first ones hit. But the Netherlands was really insisting that that conditionality still applies. So the compromise they agreed last night is there will be only one condition, and that's that the money must be spent on health care. As long as it's spent on health care, there's no further conditionality or oversight. If it's not on health care, that's another story. Then the normal rules apply. And this will enable, Centeno said, the countries to draw up to 2% of their GDP from the fund. And he thinks that the healthcare costs of all of this are going to be so significant that they will reach that 2% threshold.
Okay, Dave, so the debate over the European Stability Mechanism and how it can now be used in the new context of this new crisis, that's been put to bed. But there has been another big debate ongoing. It's over the issue of corona bonds. Tell us again what exactly they are and where that idea stands today.
Yeah, that was the other big issue causing disagreement here. Now, this is an issue that also goes back to the financial crisis. During that time, the heavily affected in-debt countries in Southern Europe wanted the debt of the Eurozone to be collectivized. They wanted all the countries that use the euro to guarantee the debt of all the countries. Why? Because it brings down their borrowing costs on the international market. So this call for so-called euro bonds has been brought back with a new name, Corona bonds, and the idea is that in the economic recovery period to come, Spain and Italy are going to have to borrow heavily from the international markets, and that's going to come at a high price because they're already very in debt. If the northern countries are able to guarantee that debt, the cost will be lower, and it saves a potential return to the sovereign debt crisis. Netherlands was resisting this as well, but Germany, which was kind of relaxed on the ESM issue, they also do not like this idea still. So what they agreed last night is kind of a fudge. They've agreed something called an innovative financial instrument that will be used to fight the coronavirus economic fire. But how that instrument will be built, they've left to EU leaders. I'm hearing that there may be a summit, another video summit of national leaders, prime ministers and presidents next week to talk about this. Now, this idea of a financial instrument was a French generated compromise. And it does seem to have worked because both sides came out of this last night claiming victory. The Italian minister said, we have the start of corona bonds, and the Dutch minister was saying, see, this shows there will never be corona bonds. So to be continued on that front.
Okay, Dave, we'll leave it at that for now, but thanks indeed, Dave Keating there, bringing us the current state of play and the financial measures being put in place at an EU level. Well, for the first time since the start of the COVID-19 crisis, the number of people in intensive care units from that infection here in France has fallen slightly, down just 1%, but it is a sign, the authorities say, that confinement is working. It comes 5 days after seeing a similar number start to fall in Italy. Well, here's what the French health minister has to say.
Le premier signe de ralentissement observé ce soir est lié à votre bon respect du confinement, à votre bon respect des mesures barrières, et donc je vous en remercie. Notre stratégie de défense face au virus, face à la maladie, face à cette épidémie meurtrière, par le confinement généralisé sur le territoire national, commence à porter ses fruits. Il est donc absolument indispensable de poursuivre le confinement, la distanciation physique d'1 mètre, tous les gestes barrières et la réduction volontariste des contacts.
A step in the right direction, but France is still far from being free of the danger of this new virus, with the search, of course, for a treatment still to be found. The French president has been visiting with one French doctor who suggested that anti-malarial drugs could beat COVID-19, a claim many other medics have rejected, saying as yet they simply don't have any proof that it's true. Emerald Maxwell tells us more.
The meeting wasn't announced in advance. French President Emmanuel Macron visiting this hospital in Marseille, the workplace of Professor Didier Raoult, a doctor that has made headlines for touting chloroquine as a treatment for coronavirus. His claims about the drug normally used to treat malaria have divided opinion. At the end of February, Raoult called chloroquine the endgame against COVID-19, after a trial on 24 patients showed the virus disappearing in all but a quarter of them.
Il y a une espèce de mon point de vue, il y a une espèce d'excitation. Il faut trouver des médicaments nouveaux, il faut trouver des vaccins, Et donc, je leur dis, écoutez, vous voulez pas, juste la chloroquine, c'est pas compliqué, c'est pas cher, vous voulez pas prendre ça. Enfin, vous coupez l'herbe sous les pieds d'une quantité de gens qui pensent qu'ils vont avoir le prix Nobel pour avoir trouvé un nouveau médicament contre le coronavirus, ou un nouveau vaccin.
The doctor is known as a maverick, but also a respected microbiologist who has already made a name for himself with a number of discoveries prior to coronavirus. But Raoult's latest findings are controversial. Despite winning the support of some high-profile politicians, including US President Donald Trump, many in the scientific community criticize his methods in the chloroquine studies he's conducted and the low number of patients tested. Raoult maintains that his new trial confirms chloroquine's efficiency. But last week, doctors in Paris reported that they had tried to replicate the results and failed. Officials say that Macron is consulting a broad spectrum of voices before giving his third address on the epidemic to the nation on Monday.
Hospitalisations are starting to decrease in a number of countries, but while encouraging, the levelling off is at a very high level of infection. In the UK, the government says confinement measures will need to be extended. The highest profile of the over 1.5 million people infected by this virus, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, has now left intensive care. Selena Sykes reports.
Some good news for the United Kingdom. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been moved out of intensive care, where he spent 3 nights receiving oxygen treatment. A statement from Downing Street said the 55-year-old was in extremely good spirits, but that he would remain in this hospital in London. For the time being, Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab will continue to deputise the Prime Minister.
It's been almost 3 weeks, and we're starting to see the impact of the sacrifices we've all made. But the deaths are still rising, and we haven't yet reached the peak of the virus. So it's still too early to lift the measures that we've put in place.
While the number of new infections and hospital admissions are beginning to show signs of flattening, the UK's death toll remains very high, confirming a record of 938 deaths on Wednesday and another 881 on Thursday, bringing the total to nearly 8,000. For now, hospitals remain under severe pressure, but intensive care units have not reached capacity. Field hospitals like this one in Manchester, as well as testing centres, are being built across the UK in order to meet expected demand.
Another 6.6 million people applied for unemployment benefits in the US in the past week. That brings the total of 16 million in a little more than a fortnight. The biggest tally of job losses since the country started keeping records in 1948, and more job cuts are expected. President Donald Trump insists that the economy will recover rapidly with a big bounce back. First, though, the danger from COVID-19 has to be tackled. New York State recording another record-breaking number of deaths for a third straight day now. Overall, 7,000 people in New York have died from the virus. That's almost half of the total number of fatalities in the US to date. From New York, our correspondent Jessica Le-Mesurier.
New York is now the coronavirus capital. There are more positive cases here in New York than in any country in the world. The virus has now claimed more than twice as many lives as the 9/11 attacks. Hospitalisation rates, however, are slowing. While the death toll continues to rise, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said that it is encouraging to see that hospital admissions are going down for a second day running. This could indicate that as we approach Easter Sunday, we may have already reached the apex, or at least we are nearing it here in New York. But he told New Yorkers not to get complacent, that they need to continue social distancing, and that the restrictions that have been put in place are working. The fact that schools are closed, the fact that non-essential businesses are closed, and the fact that people are, on the whole, staying at home unless they really need to go out for something essential. He warned, however, that this could only be the first wave of the virus here in New York. He told New Yorkers not to relax, to keep doing what they're doing and staying in their homes. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio confirmed that some coronavirus victims will now be buried on Hart Island. There's a cemetery there. It's an island in the Long Island Sound in the Bronx.
Well, meanwhile, a call for a ceasefire in Yemen in order to address the spread of COVID-19 so far appears to go unanswered. A Saudi-led coalition fighting against Houthis said they would hold their offensive after a UN plea for as much, but Houthi rebels dismissed the entire thing as political manoeuvring. Now, the main danger of COVID-19 is when infections become severe, people struggle to breathe. As a result, ventilators have become vital for some patients. In Senegal, a team of 6 scientists are working on making a machine using 3D printers. It would mean they could produce up to 50 a week. Currently, the country only has 80 ventilators available. Laurent Berstecker reports.
Since the start of the COVID-19 epidemic, the Senegalese researchers have been working around the clock to develop a locally made ventilator, a prototype that can be almost entirely built with a 3D printer.
Donc il y a certaines parties de la machine que nous usinons nous-mêmes, nous concevons et nous imprimons. Et là, vous avez la machine qui imprime des pièces qui sont utilisées dans la machine.
For patients suffering from acute COVID-19 symptoms, having access to a ventilator can often be the difference between life and death. But these machines are complicated and expensive to produce, and even countries such as France and the US are facing widespread shortages. Senegal currently has an estimated 80 working ventilators for the entire country, far from enough to deal with a potential nationwide epidemic. These researchers say that while their prototype is less efficient and sustainable than hospital-grade machines, it only costs around $70 to produce.
Les ventilateurs qui sont dans les hôpitaux coûtent très cher, c'est vrai, mais aussi ont un certain confort dans l'utilisation et certaines caractéristiques d'ordre de longévité. On va essayer d'aller le maximum possible vers ces respirateurs, mais il faut aussi savoir qu'on n'aura pas forcément la même finition.
After final adjustments and inspections are made, the prototype will have to be reviewed by the country's health authorities. If approved, the scientists estimate they could produce up to 50 a week.
Okay, well, that's where we're going to have to leave it for this edition. Do take care.